Well, guess what, folks? Over my right shoulder, Supreme Court, right across the street from Capitol Hill. And guess what? The Affordable Care Act is back at the Supreme Court, this time in the case King versus Burwell, at issue whether or not the federal government can continue to subsidize states using a federal health exchange instead of setting up state exchanges. If the court decides that the federal government is overstepping its bounds, then approximately 10 million folks will lose health coverage that they currently receive under the Affordable Health Care Act. Let's talk about it with Michelle Jawando, the Center for American Progress. Also, of course, Jamila Lemieux, Senior Digital Editor at Ebony Magazine and Ebony.com, and also Dr. Jason Johnson, Political Science Professor, Hiram College. This is an interesting case because this really has a direct impact on the people who most need health care. I talked to various experts who say that some 60% of the folks receiving subsidies are in the South, largely many of them African American. But what's interesting is that a lot of them are poor white men who are also most impacted by this.
The majority of the people who are actually receiving subsidies, and I think this is a hidden secret, are actually white Southerners. And they're actually middle class or working middle class Americans. What's so interesting about this case is what we know is this is essentially an ideological attack on Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act that's masquerading itself as somehow it's a statutory interpretation case. And we know that that's just not true. Conservative ideologues haven't been able to overturn the Affordable Care Act at the ballot box or even in Congress, although they've tried over 50 times. And so what they're doing now is they're turning their efforts to the Supreme Court with the hopes that they can somehow use the court as a third branch of their conservative ideology.
I mean, this is interesting because when you look at this case, you have these southern states led by Republican governors and legislatures who want to get rid of this, but the very people who need help are the sick folks in your state, and many of them who are voting for you to be in office.
This is no different, Roland, than last fall when you had states that were vehemently against raising the minimum wage and then voted to raise the minimum wage in their own states. I mean, it's that kind of ridiculous behavior and counterproductive behavior. And I'll say this, even before we get into the logistics and the technicalities of the law, what are y'all going to do if this happens? That's my question to the Republican Party. In Ohio, Virginia, Florida, all these critical states that you need in 2016, if you throw all these people off their health care, you better have another plan in place, and they don't right now. So I don't even see long-term how this is a smart idea.
Well, not only that, but also what jumps out at me is that when you look at folks like John Kasich, governor of Ohio,
exactly,
who has made the case that, look, you kind of need to have Medicaid expansion. You might want to embrace this. When you look at Kentucky, what they have done, and again, I go back to who is most in need. Take the Affordable Care Act off the table. Before that's even passed, some of the sickest states when it comes to health, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas. I mean, I can go down the line, and those are the biggest critics of the Affordable Care Act.
You know, this is the actual definition of cutting off your nose to spite your face. This is poised to be President Obama's greatest legacy, certainly on the domestic front. And it's really unfortunate that these people, not just in office, but the voters, are willing to work against their own interests simply to deny this man his place in the history books.
Speaking of him, what I've said specifically to the White House and to him is that what I don't understand is how you have not gone to folks directly, gone to the home district of Senator Jeff Sessions in Alabama, gone to the home district of Thad Cochran, the senator from Mississippi, gone to the home district of David Vitter in Louisiana, and gone to the home district of Corkle and Lamar Alexander in Tennessee, and the same thing in Georgia, and literally go talk to white voters, the folks who are benefiting from this, and say, I did not pass this law just for the folks in Chicago and Detroit. I also passed it for you. And I do believe one of the reasons that you have this battle going on is because, in my estimation, the White House has not gotten that raw saying, hey, white conservative voters, you white men out there who are voting against your own interests, You are benefiting from this.
Right.
You're the one signing up for it. That to me also I think is a part of the problem here.
Well, I think there's something else that's happening here, because what we've seen recently, there are a number of polls that are out in the field, and even conservatives are saying they don't want the Supreme Court to strike down their subsidies, because now they're actually getting health care. So they may have hated Obamacare when it was moving down the system, but they actually now are getting care, they're getting checkups, they're dealing with their preventative measures. And so we are seeing this outpouring from all of the sides across the ideological spectrum that are saying, don't take my care. There's a recent poll that just came out. There are over 4 million women and over 1 million women of color who are receiving tax credits under the Affordable Care Act. And what are all of these senators who were so excited to support this cockamamie lawsuit, what are they going to say to their constituents in this state?
But Jason, if you do not rally those people to use their voices, then there still is this perception that, oh, so many people are against, very few are for, and I just think you have to move those people to act.
Roland, the president's never been a good salesman on this deal. Like, from the beginning, they never did a good job of explaining why this is necessary and why this is important. And showing me commercials of suburbanites suffering through cancer 3-4 years after the fact is not enough to really make the sale. And that's why they've always had difficulty with this. And I agree. We saw the same thing when the president was trying to talk about infrastructure. He goes once to Boehner's district and talks about the 75th bridge. He needs to go everywhere. He needs to have Hillary. He needs to have tons of people out there on a regular basis. And now it's too late. And now they're going to have to depend on the Supreme Court to bail him out.
Give me a little final comment.
I agree. I think it's time for the president to stand up for this piece of legislation and what he's done for people, not attempted to do, what he's done for people. And if he's unable to look them in the eye and say, look, you're relying upon this health care. You have it, you use it, the numbers are telling us that you're happy with it. What are you going to do to advocate for yourselves?
Supreme Court will hear oral arguments. They're expected to decide by when?
June. So oral arguments in about 2 hours. Supreme Court, do the right thing.
Okay, I surely appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. We come back, talk about doing the right thing. Hollywood. Oh, they give to the NAACP and they give to the Urban League and they support Reverend Jackson, Reverend Sharpton. But guess what? They'll hire black people. We're going to break down this new report that says 94% of all studio executives in Hollywood, liberal Hollywood, they're white and largely male. Also